crucial. I think that it needs to be based in Brussels, it needs to be engaged with all the right trade lobbies, and it needs to acutely forecast the issues that might be on the horizon. We cannot be complacent. The animals rights lobby will not give up, and the negative messages that we have around halal industry will not go away. It's important that we have a network that engages in Brussels, in Westminster, to deal with these issues. It's also important that we begin to engage the animal rights lobby. And, there's a whole lecture to be given on how to do that, but, that's for another time. I also think it's important to begin to educate Muslim consumers on the power of the Muslim pound. Now, you all heard of the pink pound, and if you haven't, the pink pound is a kind of movement to encourage individuals who are inclined towards homosexuality to kind of spend in a concentrated fashion. And that's a whole movement. There's a thesis is written on how this has developed and how it's grown. I think we can learn a lot from them. And a lot of people might take discomfort at that fact, but I really feel as Muslims we can learn a lot from how they have leveraged their economic clout. And for instance, if we look at some of the way that they've targeted businesses, some of the way that they've developed branding around it and an identity, but most importantly, and I think we're missing out on this, how do we convince our own audience to take halal seriously and to spend their money in a halal sense and to engage in halal products? We're losing our own audience. And I'm saying this as a youngish British Muslim who, anecdotally, when I speak to my friends, even when I speak to my staff about how much they spend on halal, the only thing they do halal is halal meat. And it's because they don't see the values of doing anything beyond that. So we have to educate our own demographic, and there needs to be a campaign to do that. Otherwise we'll lose, in the West certainly, our own demographic and our natural client base. I mean, this is an idea that I think might have some traction. And the idea is to create an EU-wide halal watchdog. Now, and the reason I say this is that Sir Iqbal eloquently spoke earlier about the issue of pork being mixed into minced meat that was sold as halal. Now, of course, what will happen is the press generally, and broadly the unsympathetic press, will pick up on this as examples of poor standards in the halal industry. I think the Muslims need to own that across Europe. If the halal industry is not performing, we need to own that. We need to be the first to say, well, hang on, there is a problem there. And there needs to be an almost watchdog element. And individuals need to ban them so that before the others say, hey, look at the poor quality of Muslim meat, we already have an established way of naming and shaming. I mean, in an ideal world, you wouldn't have to do that, but I think when it comes to consumer spending, one must take that seriously. So it's almost like, consumer watchdog, but for Muslims. And of course, we need to begin the process of getting key messages out in the media as a preventative measure. Of course, we need to convince halal manufacturers to invest in their media, marketing and advertising. Of course, all of us need to engage in lobbying, all of us need to engage in stakeholder relationships. We can't leave it to chance. That is so important, particularly in the current climate. So my final thoughts in terms of summing up. I think that the halal industry as a whole is letting itself down by not investing in public relations and public affairs. I think that is a crucial element of what we're trying to achieve here. And also, it's by its very nature, halal, in a sense, is an evangelical movement, and we need to understand that and take it seriously because we're projecting an image of our faith. What we're saying is that our business is creating the values that our faith has inspired us, and if we're not investing and we're not explaining that, we're doing a disservice to not just to our faith but to our industry. The promotion of halal is as important as the concept itself. I think that's sort of relatively self-challenging, and I really think that the challenge moving forward for all of us here is to make halal attractive to wider audiences, and that really is going to be the conversation and the long-term viability of halal in Europe over the next 5 to 10 years. Before I leave, I'd like to thank everybody here in making this possible. It's a wonderful forum. I'd like to thank the organisers, James in particular, and also Adol Evans for giving me this opportunity, and I hope that we can all, inshallah, learn a lot from each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Mudassir, for a very informative presentation. As a marketer myself, I can really appreciate the power of PR and communication and marketing halal. On a side note, in my reading, I discovered that Her Royal Highness the Queen has asked her staff to initiate a monarch page on Facebook for the family, and it just shows the sign of the times. I'd like to invite the director of the World Halal Forum Europe for UK, Haj Abdulhamid Evans, to enlighten us on the state of halal markets in the West. Abdulhamid.
Good morning. Before I start, I'm just going to rearrange the computers. I want to start by saying a few words about food in general. When we get I want to focus a little bit on just the nature of the halal industry and the halal sector. It is driven primarily by food. And let's think about food for a moment. Food is actually a deep concern of the human creature, and it's one of the reasons why, or the issues surrounding halal and the issues surrounding the halal food market run deep, and why people have strong concerns and strong opinions about it. Food is the first thing we think about when we are born. Food is a primal concern for the human being. So the question of our relationship with food and with the food industry is something that goes very deep inside every individual. Food is primarily where we meet the world. It's where we engage with the other. As a child coming into the world, your first experience of the world is based around food. So food is an affair of deep concern, and I think this gives us some idea of why the halal industry has a strength and a power, and why it goes deeply into everybody's beings. In terms of the halal sector, we have to understand, for 1 in 4 people on earth, the food that we eat needs to be halal. This is the extent of the Muslim population. And also we are growing at a rate faster than almost every other population in the world. So the importance of the halal food sector is only going to increase as the years pass. This issue of halal, it crosses global markets. As we heard earlier, on this issue of international halal standards, there are no international standards, there are only national standards. But the industry itself is already international. The industry already crosses boundaries. It involves global industries who practice their business all over the world. It transcends geography, it transcends culture, and in fact it also transcends religion. For while halal is essentially an Islamic affair, to do with Muslim food for the Muslims, everyone involved in the industry there's a majority of people who are not Muslim involved in the halal food sector. So this is already, whether we like it or not, if we look at what the halal sector is, it's already a multicultural, multi-geographic, international, multi-religious affair. And I think we need to also bear that in mind. Europe, within this global picture, Europe is an essential component. Europe has a very strong, well-established Muslim community. It's growing. We are now into 3rd generation of European Western Muslims, both from the immigrant communities and from the indigenous European convert communities. Europe is going to be a key player in the way the halal sector develops in the coming years. And I think within the European picture, the role of the UK is extremely important. The UK, the whole world is in the UK. Even, now you walk down the street in London, often you don't hear English being spoken. The races and the cultures and the populations who are now in England basically represent the whole world. Certainly the Ummah is all represented in the UK, and it's a diverse and complex Muslim community here. I think we're actually, in terms of the halal industry, if we look at it as a global phenomenon, I think we're actually at a kind of pivotal moment in time and space at the moment. Time in terms of how the industry is developing, but also in terms of where we are now with this forum. how the World Halal Forum has also extended out from Southeast Asia. And I think this phenomenon of holding gatherings to really enable the industry to gather, and for the industry to look at the concerns of what are the issues if you were involved in producing halal food. And the first World Halal Forum was very much started with that intention. And that really created a kind of ripple, and it was like a wave that started in Southeast Asia. And from Malaysia and the surrounding countries, they took a very strong initiative in terms of looking at halal as an engine of growth for the national economy. If we develop a halal industry in this country, what effects will it have on agriculture, on SMEs, on exports, on potential inward foreign investment? So halal began to be looked at in a completely different way within Southeast Asia. But this ripple has now spread across the world, and we find that even within Western countries, and certainly in other non-Muslim countries, the reality of what the halal industry can be and what role can it play if we let it emerge as a powerful economic, social and political force. I think we're at the point where we're really opening a new chapter. There's been an ongoing conversation about halal for decades in various parts of the world. In the West, there are many people who've been involved in this for many years. They've been trailblazers and pioneers in this, but I think all of them would accept and recognize that at times that whole conversation gets stuck. And one of the things that we hope to do by this forum is to find ways to move the conversation forward and to find mechanisms which enable us to turn the things that we talk about into actions which will improve the industry and improve the confidence that the consumers have in the halal food which is available, and also change the perception that big industry has about it, and also that the governments in the West change the perception that they have about this. And there are several key elements here. There's a religious dimension, there's a political dimension, there's a commercial dimension, and I know I had another point on there, that was the media, but it seems to have dropped off, but inshallah I'll get to it. Oh, there it is, okay, exactly. I'm going to look at these four separate issues now as we just go forward. If we look at the kind of religious element, there's no question, this is the foundation. If we don't take the religious component of halal, we don't have anything. So it has its foundation in the application of the Sharia. But the interesting thing about the halal sector now is that if we look at what is happening is that basically Sharia is being applied within the commercial and the manufacturing arena on a global level. This has not happened for an awfully long time. And in a way, it's never really happened in the way that it is happening now. The applications of Islamic Sharia have been sidelined to births, marriages and deaths, and to affairs of private faith. But the engagement with Islamic law in the commercial arena is really something that has certainly not happened since the fall of the Ottoman Caliphate. And the engagement with commerce and manufacturing is something new, and I think we need to recognize that this is we don't necessarily have the answers at hand. I think it requires another level of investigation and another level of research and application. I believe the key to this is that it really requires another genuinely